going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round one prop live stream for the PGA Championship. Some of you guys may have seen me over there on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel going through some of the DFS stuff out there for tomorrow. But here in this preview, we're going to go over the prop and betting side of things. So if you're playing on sites like Underdog and PrizePicks, that is exactly what we're going to go over here. And I'll include some of the stat averages from the Wells Fargo Championship, which is the same course that we're playing for this week. We'll talk about exactly how that'll change here for tomorrow, including a look at the weather report, how that'll impact play for round number one, as well as a few slips and pieces of exposure that I've already gone to out there for tomorrow. So go ahead, hit me up with any questions that you've got down there in the chat. If you're just here to take in the content, say hi while you guys file in here as well. Smash that like button for me if you guys haven't already as well. It just helps get this out there to even more people so that we can try and rob the books for even more money than we already are. So it looks like a pretty good setup for round one. I'm really liking my exposure out there, so hyped to get into it. We got Bobby Bombs down there already, an OG of the channel, and it's looking like no lift clean in place as of right now. They are trying to go without it, but they're going to have to see how the golf course looks tomorrow morning. So barring any sort of overnight rain, probably not going to have lift clean in place. So then what's going on, Rebecca? He said, let's go Gsluke, you're the truth, let's make it a great major week. Amen to that. And I've got my water here, just keeping it cool over here on a Wednesday night. Let's talk about all the exposure for tomorrow. So first things first, let's go through these stat averages. So you can see them on the screen right here, and this is from the Wells Fargo. So this is a non-major, but it's going to be played with a very similar style of conditions. They had very firm greens because they were brand new after a renovation, but they also had soft fairways because they had rained the week of the event last year. So the average being 8.7 per round with the fairways, green average also being a little bit higher than what you typically see around here, was because of the same kind of weather that they're going to have here for round one, which if you haven't been paying attention to the news with the PGA Championship, which you might be living under a rock if you haven't seen the weather forecast so far, they got a bunch of rain on Monday and Tuesday. So this golf course is going to be soft. That's why we had the question about that lift clean in place. But it's going to be a lot drier than what they thought early in the week because they're not doing lift clean in place anymore. I do think that it's going to be running with the sub airs overnight. So they're going to try and suck even more of that moisture out of this golf course. So I think that these averages for the entire event back here in 2024 are going to be pretty spot in line with what we have for round number one, which is about a half a par over par scoring average. But as the week goes on, so for rounds 2 through 4, I think it's going to get even more difficult. They're going to let the rough go out, not likely going to cut that down at any point. The greens are just going to get firmer as they let that sub air crank. And by the weekend, it might be playing like 1 to 2 strokes over par, which is what they normally like at these major championships. They like to make them as much of a test as possible for these tour players. And that's normally how they accomplish that kind of a thing. So the birdie average, I think will be a little bit better than what you had last year just because of the softer conditions. So maybe closer to like 3.5 per round as opposed to this 3.4 mark. The bogey average, I don't know if that one's going to move all that much. Maybe it goes down a hair to like 3.65 or 3.7 per round. Fairway average, maybe it goes up a little bit. Green average, maybe that goes up a little bit as well to like 10.5 per round, but I don't expect any drastic differences. And part of the reason for that is that Wells Fargo Championship was played with an elite level field. And in fact, an even better field on average than what we're going to get at this major, which I know sounds crazy to say because it's a major, it's the best field in all of golf, but there's a lot of really shitty golfers towards the bottom end of the PGA Championship that are going to negatively impact these averages. Whereas at the signature level events like you had for the Wells Fargo, there's no club pros, for example, down there at the bottom end of the pricing. So keep that in mind when it comes to some of this stuff, that the field strength matters. But what you need to know from round number one is that these averages that you're seeing right there, I think are going to be pretty useful for that round. Next up, we have the weather report, which you can see with this HRRR is calling for a lot calmer conditions in the morning than the afternoon. And the temperatures are going to be pretty mild the entire day, as opposed to last week where they started a few days closer to 45, even 50 degrees Fahrenheit at the very most, I'd say, over in Philadelphia. Now they're starting at 66 degrees. And by the time we get to 8 a.m. Eastern local time, it's going to be 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's going to warm up rather quickly out there. And it is a 10-degree difference from 8 a.m. towards the afternoon, but it's going from 70 to 80 degrees. It's not going from like 45 to 70 degrees, where it's a much bigger difference with the scoring at that kind of a difference. And when you're going from 70 to 80, you're talking about marginal differences when it comes to how far the ball is actually flying. So I think that the morning tomorrow is going to be the side that plays easier, mostly because the wind's kicking up in the afternoon. But I don't think the afternoon is going to be overly difficult. So morning wave, I think it'll play like maybe a quarter of a stroke over par. Afternoon wave, maybe someone like 0.75 strokes over par. So if you're looking to find positive stance plays, by positive stance plays, I mean like unders on strokes or overs on birdies, I'd be doing that for the first half of the tee times just because it looks like they're getting a little bit of a break. Whereas if I'm trying to force in fades, players where I'm taking overs on strokes, maybe unders on birdies, that same kind of idea for other categories, I'd be doing that with the PM wave players. And it's not even just the weather and the wind that I think is going to create a big factor. It's the course drying up too, because you're going to have relatively sunny conditions. They're not expected to have rain during play tomorrow. So that golf course is just going to continue to get drier and bouncier as that day goes on. So for example, like your green average, I think is going to be lower in the afternoon than it is in the morning, not just because of the winds making it slightly harder to hit those greens, but also because it's going to firm up the golf course a bit. And even when you hit some of the greens in the PM wave, the ball is going to ricochet off of the surface. So that's why I'm trying to take my positive stance plays early when I can. I'm not doing it with every single play that I'm using for tomorrow, but in general, as a rule of thumb for what I'm getting to, it is certainly skewed that way out there in most cases. So that's how I'm using the weather to my advantage. Those are the averages that we had from last year. And now we're going to go through some of the prize picks and underdog exposure I've already taken. So if you haven't already seen the Bet the Number article I did over there on X/Twitter, make sure to check that out. But the first slip that we're going to go through here is going to be from over there. It's going to be a Mackenzie Hughes under on greens regulation, and it's going to be a Patrick Cantlay over on birdies, who I hate Patrick Cantlay. He's probably my least favorite player, but he is value out there in that direction. So we're actually going to start with the Patrick Cantlay one here just because he's the AM wave guy, and he is going off when conditions are going to be better. You're talking about sub 7 miles an hour of sustained winds, also a little bit softer greens, I would say, than what you're going to have later on. So let's bring up prize picks over here. And over on the DraftKings side, just to show you the value here, he's minus 130 for the over. So he's not like massive plus EV value. I start to say that when you get to like the minus 140, minus 150 range. That's when there's a whole lot of juice out there in your favor. But even this minus 130 is great to have in your back pocket. And if you know anything about Patrick Cantlay's game, is that this year hasn't been his best stuff. I mean, he doesn't have a win on the record, but he does have some decent like top tens, that kind of thing. Even without the flashy start to 2025, he's making a ton of birdies this year, and I'm trying to get this to load. PGADoor.com loves to take forever when we're here in the live stream. But you can see he's the number 13 birdie percentage player in all the tour this year. So you're talking about somebody who's one of the elite players that you have in that category, minus 130 odds, and he goes out early when I think conditions would be a little bit easier. And just to go back to the averages, it was about a 3.4 birdie average. I think it's going to be closer to 3.5 per round, especially in the morning wave, when it's a little bit easier scoring conditions. So if you're telling me that he's at the field average at 3.5, he's number 13 birdie percentage guy on tour, a player that's minus 130 towards the over, you could see all those different reasons for me to want to go out there and play this prop. So even though I don't like the guy, he's one of my least favorite players that we have in the entire world. Yeah, I'll take the positive stance play on Patrick Cantlay. And if he ends up going under and laying a duck out there, then I can hate him even more than what I already do. So I like the value there. I think he's a really good play. And yeah, it pains me to say, but I'm taking that over. And then on the other side of this, I took a fade on Mackenzie Hughes, who is a member at Quail Hollow. You've probably heard that from a few channels this week if you guys have watched any golf content for the PGA Championship. But Mackenzie Hughes does not have a very good track record around a Quail Hollow. In fact, in his 7 starts around this golf course, he has missed the cut in 5 of those 7 starts. One of his made cuts was like a T59, something right about that. Hardly made the cut and then completely laid an egg over the weekend. And then he has one top 6 finish. So he has one really respectable start around this golf course, and then 6 times where he's certainly not been somebody you wanted to have. And if you take a look at the green regulation stats, so we were looking at the birdie or better percentage stuff before. Let's go to approach. And what you'll see here with the green stats is that Mackenzie Hughes is number 99 on the PGA Tour. So he's not been good in this category. He's been about tour average when it comes to hitting greens regulation. And the average last year was 10.08 per round. I do think that the greens being a little softer is going to help. But what you've seen, if you've watched the interviews from players this week, or what you've heard from them, I should rather say, is that they said the greens are bouncy, that the sub airs have been on during practice rounds, that they're trying to get them as firm and fast as possible. And if even the fairways, which they don't have sub airs for, they don't have to use lift clean in place after the massive storms that they got, the greens with all the fans running under them. If you don't know what a sub air is, by the way, it's quite literally heated fans. It's not just fans. They heat them up so that it further makes that evaporation happen even quicker. It's via induction under those green complexes. Those are going to be toasty out there. So that 10.5 average, I'm not even sure if it's going to come to fruition. There's a chance that it's just right about this 10 average that you had out there for last year, meaning that guys at 11.5 greens are going to have to gain 2 greens to go over this sort of number. And Mackenzie Hughes, some guys, it might make sense to gain 2 greens. Like Keith Mitchell's a good iron player. Nikolai Højgaard's a good long iron player. Like I could kind of see it with a few of those kind of players. Mackenzie Hughes, who's a PM wave player, which is, by the way, when the winds are going to kick up and the greens are going to get even drier as the day goes on, he projects for about 10 greens in this sort of field, especially if the average is going to be about 10 per round. So I've got a pretty big edge on this one. I've got him down at about 10 for a projection, which means that this is 1.5 too high. So that's why that was one of the first few props I went out there and played overall for this week. And then this Patrick Cantlay one, it was also the second prop I went out there and played for this week. So I don't like the guy, but it was an obvious piece to go out there and mix in from the morning. And this is another example to go back to the weather edge that we were talking about before, where you can take, positive stance play early, negative stance play later, and get a better payout. Because, if we were to take 2 negative stance plays, this would only be 2.5x. If we were to take 2 positive stance plays, so let's do something like that, it'd only be 2.75x that you're getting for the payout. Because we can structure our cards in this way and take advantage of the changing course conditions, you can get normal payout cards on these, if not even better payouts than what you can get on some of these other sites. So for example, this is just 2 random props. These are not ones that I actually took. We're going to go through some underdog stuff here in a second that I actually played. But if you took like a positive stance play and then a fade on the underdog side, it's 3.24x that you're getting for that kind of combination. So that's the advantage of using that sort of a weather edge to in your back pocket. And what I did with a lot of my exposure for round number 1. And it's kind of similar to what I do for when we have multiple golf tournaments going on. If you guys have been following the channel for a while, you'll know that there's a lot of times where I'll play stuff for Live Golf, mix it up with PGA, or take DP World Tour props, mix it up with PGA as well, so that I get full 3x payouts. It's not like you're playing 2 different events by mixing in the 2 different waves, but you are getting 2 different sets of conditions. One where it's ideal, perfect for unders, and then the other side where it's going to be a little bit harder and not all those unders are going to go out there and hit. So that's why we can almost treat it like we're dealing with 2 golf courses, which is also why you're getting that kind of payout. So that's the prize pick slip that we'll take, by the way. That was over there on the Bet the Number blog. So if you guys are already following over there, make sure to follow that for all my exposure. And then on the underdog side, we're going to go through a few props as well. So I'm going to catch up on chat, see if there's any prize picks props that you guys wanted me to deep dive. But if there's anything that we don't go through here together, we're going to spend quite a while here together here in live stream going through some of these props. Just let me know what you're curious about, right? It could be a matchup, birdie prop, maybe strategy when it comes to putting together your prop slips. I know we talk about a lot of picks and plays on these live streams, but there's a strategy involved to this, just like there is for DFS. When you're putting together slips, you're making sure you're not getting overexposed to certain plays, making sure you're getting the right payouts on cards, making sure that you're going after the right number of legs on the kind of parlays that you're entering is key for keeping this sustainable long term. So it's a little bit harder to do the content for it because it's only been around for like 1.5 years, 2 years, when people have been really taking this prop stuff seriously. But we've tried to incorporate it as we've gone on. So any questions like that too, feel free to go ahead and let me know. But let's see what's going on. He said it's going to touch close to 90 on the weekends. Yeah, I know you're in the Carolinas, right? And he said maybe we can get some Lucas Glover swamp ass. that's going to require him to make the weekends. But he's a ball striker. He could get the job done. And he said, do I think these averages from Wells Fargo last year, he said the course is longer than it was already. Yeah, those are the averages from the Wells Fargo. I think they matter because, I mean, what else are we going to use, right? It's 75 yards longer, which over an 18-hole sample size is an average of like less than 5 yards a hole. So you're talking about a longer golf course, but how much does 5 yards a hole actually matter for guys that hit the ball a long way? So yeah, I'm using the averages because it's the best that we've got. But yeah, I do think it's going to play a little bit harder on the weekend, not when they have a soft golf course like this. He said Tom Kim over on bogeys or worse. He's got the PMT time and he's a below average bogey maker. I could see that. I do like the PMT time. His form has been terrible this year. So that's why the bogey avoidance isn't that great. The one thing I would say, Rebecca, that I just like to be devil's advocate a lot of times when I get comments down here because I know I kind of agree with you for the most part. And I think it would be boring for me to just to say, like, I think that's a great play, go with it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback just to make this more interesting. So if go to the bogey avoidance the last few years, here's the reason why I might talk you off of it a bit. So they go to just last year. He wasn't amazing last year, but as you can see, he was, not great, right? Number 142 on tour. The year before that, though, this is what I remember about Tom Kim, is his first ever year out here on tour, he was number 17 when it came to bogey avoidance. He was one of the best players that you had on tour. The year before that, I don't know if he had enough rounds to qualify, but let's see. Did Tom Kim have enough? I guess, yeah, he didn't have enough rounds the year before that to go out there and qualify, but he's a good bogey avoider when he's playing solid golf. Now, is he playing solid golf right now? Absolutely not. So that's why I tend to agree with you out there on that spot. Good one, Rebecca. Agree with that. Yeah, Tom Kim does suck lately. He said, looking to use your 40% boost on round one. You're thinking about Mitchell top 20 and a half. Not sure what else to look at. Ooh, those like day one top 20s aren't really my expertise. I've never bet one over there on Underdog. And the one thing I'll say, Mass, is that 99% of the time, the odds that you're getting on sports books are going to be significantly better than what you're getting on that sort of a site. Not to say that you can't play those kind of things. It's just that you've got to do your due diligence, make sure that they're giving you close to a fair payout, close to what you'd get if you're entering on a sports book. In that case with Keith Mitchell top 20, let me a sip of water. Keith Mitchell, terrible name, by the way. Funny guy, though. I do like this week. I bet him for a top 10, so I think he's got the chance to top 20 for sure. It's just that make sure that you're not getting screwed on the payout. That's always my advice with those kind of props. What's going on, Sean? You said you're wondering who I think will have more success between a Keegan Bradley or a Denny McCarthy. That's a tough one for me. If I had to choose between the two, I would side towards Keegan Bradley just because he's a better driver of the golf ball, both in terms of distance and accuracy. He's a plus player in both categories. And this is a course, at least to my kind of knowledge, based on what I'm modeling for this week, I think it's an off the tee heavy golf course. It's long. It's added 75 yards to it, right? It's even longer than normal. You've got rain, which is going to make it even longer. I do think it could be tough out there. He said, good insight. He said, that's why I'm one of the GOATs. Thanks. Hey, I appreciate the kind of words out there. And we'll try and live up to that nickname here. So let's go through some Underdog stuff. And over on the Underdog side, it's the similar kind of thought process where if you want to balance out the payout, you can take an over and an under. But even if you wanted to go with a double fade slip, I think that's an option too. So let's go to this Terrell Haddon fade first. And I actually like Haddon this week. He's one of my favorite players, so it kind of pains me that I'm playing this fade. But I'm taking this under on greens regulation, and that was even money when I played it. Now it has this 0.89x multiplier. So you know what? We're not going to take that one. I want to be giving you guys props that are fresh and don't have any sort of extra multiplier on it. So let me scroll through here and find something that has the exact same payout. And the positive stance plays are actually going to be easy to find. There are a few over here on Underdog that I played just like we had on the prize pick side. But some of the fades, like you saw there with that Haddon under at 12.5, are the favorite props that I've entered out here for this week. So I want to make sure I can give you guys one of those. Another one was this Max Homa over on strokes. That one went from even money to that 0.92x multiplier. So like I said, I don't want to give you guys a stale prop. So I'm going to find something that hasn't moved. And I only entered 3 slips here on Underdog. I entered 3 on prize picks and then 3 on sleeper too, which by the way, if you're not entering golf props on sleeper quite yet, I would get to that because they have a lot of value that you can find over there. Who was the other fade I took? Let me check on the other tab. My apologies if that was loud. I just threw my phone at the screen there. But I'm going to take a look at what I entered here on the other tab just so I can refresh my memory. The other fade I played, which one was it? Oh, sorry. Let me see if they haven't moved to this one. They probably have. Michael Kim, who is dealing with some injury stuff right now. He's at 71.5, and wow, they put a massive multiplier on him. So before this, he was at even money at 71.5. So you know what? We'll just go with a double positive stance play, which I did like the fades a little bit more. So it makes this a little bit annoying that I can't give you my favorite plays, but there's still some stuff we can go out here and mix in. I think they all have a multiplier though. So put it this way, the underdog lines makers are the scaredest bunch I've ever seen. They have no confidence behind their projections. So I shouldn't be surprised that they go with all of these bumps. But in terms of my favorite positive stance play, we're going to go with the Xander Schauffele under on strokes. So I played it with a 0.87x multiplier. It's 0.86x now. So it's a little different payout wise, but it's not going to make that big a difference when it comes to your actual payout. But I took him because he was a morning wave player. He's teeing off at 8:22 a.m. Eastern time, which is when conditions are going to be the best that they will be the entire day. And Xander Schauffele at this golf course, the last two times they played it at Quail Hollow, Wells Fargo that is, he finished in second place. So he has a lot of success, a lot of familiarity around this kind of golf course. Last time it was played when he finished in second last year, it was the same kind of conditions as what you're going to get for this golf tournament as well. So that was an under I played. And I believe Haddon was the best multiplier that we had available. So you could take that under at 12.5, but the payout, I'll get this to load here in a second. We'll see what that would actually be. 2.36x. Yeah, that is just absolute dog shit. So let's find you guys a different fade to play. I was looking at the Sahith Theegala fade, but unfortunately he withdrew from the event. We actually could go to this Max Homa under on birdies. So I took his strokes over, but you could go to his under on birdies as well. And that one, if you ended up playing it, would give you a 2.7x payout. It's a little bit lower because of that multiplier on Xander. The slip that I did with Xander, I think it was like 2.81x. So like I said, it's a marginal difference multiplier wise from where I ended up playing that one. But if you want to get a better payout than some of these other multipliers, this Max Homa under and birdies would be your best bet because it gets you just under that 3x mark. And with Max Homa birdies, he is about even money on the sports books. Just to show you the Xander Schauffele one first here though. Xander Schauffele's minus 140 for his under at 70.5. So that's why he has that kind of multiplier. Max Homa, though, for whatever reason, he's at even money at this sort of projection, which I just frankly don't agree with. He's minus 120 in either direction. Benny Ann is like the same, if not a better birdie maker than Homa, and he's minus 135 under. JG Spawn's been making more birdies than Max Homa lately, and he's minus 165 under. The only thing I can think of is that Max Homa's got a really good course history around Quail Hollow, and maybe that's why they have him at even money as opposed to some of these other players that don't have that same kind of track record. But like, he's at the same projections as a Terrell Hatton, and Terrell Hatton has been an exponentially better golfer lately. So though the sportsbook odds are even money there, that's why I took the over on strokes instead, just because I do think he's probably going to make a double at some point, which would be huge for us taking that kind of a strokes fade. But even from the birdie perspective, like from the plus EV standpoint, I just don't agree with the odds that they have available. Like Colin Morikawa is only slightly better odds than Max Homa, and Morikawa is one of the top 5 odds players that you have in the field. Max Homa is like 250 to 1 to win this golf tournament. Just like make it make sense. And I know it's a different category. It's not strokes. It's not winning the event. Completely different things. Birdie or better percentage versus actually winning golf tournaments. But it's just wild to think that they have that much confidence in him making birdies on the greens around here that they're going to put him at even money as opposed to all these other players. And same thing with Cam Young. How the hell is he even money? Like, I just don't understand it when you have all these other guys that are like juiced under. And I get why guys like a Jordan Spieth would be juiced over. Same thing with like a Justin Thomas there, Colin Morikawa. Like, they're the best players that you have in this kind of field. Not so much with the Max Homa of the world. So that's what I would take over there on Underdog right now. Prize picks, I have a little bit more available that hasn't bumped quite yet. So to give you guys another piece of exposure that is something that I've actually played exactly, let's go over here on prize picks again. I wanted to give you guys a lot of exposure. Let's see. Wow. I had an over on Tommy Fleetwood fairways. I got him at 8.5. He's now at 9.5 fairways. That is wild. Now, in Cantley, by the way, he was at 8 fairways before. Now he's at 8.5. It's crazy what these sites are doing. They just love to move all these props around. But let's find another slip to play over here. So we got the Sun GM that we're going to be taking an under on over here on greens regulation. And then who was the other? 1 second, guys. Let me get a little water break in here while I double check on the exact combo I took with it. Because I know we had that Fleetwood one bump. That was going to be the prop that I paired him up with. And wow, yeah, they bumped the other one I took too. I just realized it was the Shane Lowry prop I ended up mixing in. Oh, these websites are all over me this week, but that's what happens when you have really good value. I had the over on Tommy Fleetwood, as we mentioned, and then the other positive stance play that I had was Shane Lowry over at 8.5 fairways. And they moved that one from 8.5 up to 9 fairways per round. So at this stage, the best way to get all of these lines before they end up moving is, of course, going to be on my Patreon page. You can find that down below. There's a link to that in the description of this live stream. It's only $15 a month to join my Patreon page. I do have to keep it behind a paywall, though, because as you guys can see, the sports books react to my stuff rather quickly. And if I don't put it behind a paywall for all that offhand, it moves before really anyone can catch it. So we are going to find a replacement here, just like we did over there on the Underdog side, because I still want to give you guys some exposure here on the live stream. But for everything, as soon as I'm entering, like for my top options on every slate, I'll still always give you guys advice, right? I like giving back to the community, especially for a major championship like this and whatnot. But for the things as I enter, I'm like where my money is behind them, right? That's what the Patreon page is for. And there's 2 reasons for that. 1, so that people can actually catch the props, and 2, so that I get adequately rewarded for my efforts and what I'm doing. So check that out if you guys haven't already. But let me catch up on chat before we find a replacement for Lowry, because I wouldn't recommend taking it at 9 now, but we can find something else. There was a lot of other stuff out there I was looking at too. So where did we leave off? Scotty going to be lower owned than Rory and Bryson. So let me look at my projections. That's not the case in mine. I do have him lower owned than Rory, but I've got Bryson lower owned than Scotty. So you might want to double check where you're getting your projections from. It might not be all that accurate. And it would be crazy if that's the case. I certainly disagree with it. He said, thanks, Luke. It doesn't have to be a top 20, just has to be for round 1. Yeah, that's the thing, man. Like with round 1, it might even be harder to finish in that top 20. So okay, that bet kind of sketches me out. Is Rory JT going to be a high-owned start to a lineup on FanDuel? I think so, man. I mean, you got a 30%er or a 20%er as your second man in. And because there's a 5K range, you can go the whole way down there and easily make it work salary-wise. Yeah, it's going to be maybe the most popular start with 2 players. Scotty JT, a Bryson JT, which, by the way, I like Bryson JT starts. I'm going to have quite a few of them, are going to be the most popular way to start a lineup. And that's large field GPPs or single entries. That's going to be the most popular lineup, period. He said he's still one of the best and came in on Sunday and played around before the rain came. So I'm not sure who that's talking about. Is that Keith Mitchell? You're going to have to let me know what player you're referring to, because when you say stuff like that without a player name, I've got no idea what the hell you're talking about. He said, is Niergaard Peterson going to be high owned? No, Blake. So in my projections, I've got him sub 5%. So if the ownership was the worry with him, I think you're good from that perspective. So is Homa and Hatton your 2 favorites on Underdog? You get a lower payout, but you have a 40% boost. Yeah, that's what I was saying before, man, right? That's what I would enter over there as a replacement. I don't know if I'd say they're my favorite, right? I've gone through the board. I've already entered all of my favorites. A lot of my favorites have already moved odds-wise, but based on what's available right now, yeah, that's what I pointed out for a slip over there. So that's exactly what that was for. And then on Prize Picks, we're going to find something for the Sunjay prop. So yeah, man. Let's do that right now. So that Sleeper's making a move, no doubt. The thing I like about Sleeper is that their projections, their just board in general, is so mispriced. And especially the strokes one, it's not even their fault. Like they start out the pricing decently. It's that whenever anyone places a prop, they end up bumping it. So like if like 2-3 people end up entering the same thing, they bump it an entire stroke. So they opened up Rory and Scotty, for example, at 69.5 strokes. And now Scotty's at like 67.5 strokes over there. Now, am I going to fade Scotty Scheffler? No, I just never do that. It's kind of like a sin, in my opinion, to go out there and fade the god Scotty Scheffler. But there's value over there because of how bump heavy they are. So I like them quite a bit for that reason. He said, doesn't Homa play good at Quail? He does, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to play well this time. And dude, if you're just going to keep giving me shit for every pick I give, I'm just going to tell you the same thing, bro. There's a reason why I play him. You're not going to talk me off of it. What's going on? You said you have Rory JT, Lowry, Reed, Straka, and Peterson. He said that's a lot of chalk. It's kind of a lot of chalk because you only have one pivot in that lineup. And I'm surprised you can afford all 6 of those players. He said you wish you knew ownerships. You bet those 2 lineups would be a little bit less owned. It might be Blake. Check out my projections on Patreon, right? I've got them all over there for every single player. So if you want to know all those ownership numbers, you can find it there. He said, what do I think about Power? He has good history at $5,600. Yeah, that's the argument for him. I think you hit the nail on the head. If you want a course history guy at $5,600, he's the player to go with. Patrick Rogers, too. He's had a decent track record around here, kind of like the same kind of thing as Jameis Power. There are players in that range, though, that have better form. That could be a reason for getting to a 5K guy. Then there's some high upside guys down there, too. So I think there's always a rhyme and reason for getting to someone. And yeah, for Seamus Power, that's the obvious reason there. He said 50 to 1 on Brooksy is flat out disrespectful. Best believe he's seen that and will be locked in. Yeah, man, I was trying to get that 60 to 1 number that some books were hanging, and he actually went down to 40 to 1 over on Hard Rock Bet. So I was hoping to get a little bit of a better number than that, something that was closer to that 50, 60 to 1 number. If after round 1 he drifts, let's say he shoots like -2, maybe he's like T20, that kind of thing, and he drifts to like 20 to 1. Sorry, not 20 to 1. Sorry, other way. Drifts the other way to like 60, 70 to 1. Like I'll bet that for sure. He's the kind of guy that gets better as the week goes on too. Is Cauley and Mitchell in the same lineup? Or is those 2 in the same lineup too chalky? I mean, Cauley's not that chalky, bro. Cauley's sub 5%. So, I mean, Mitchell's really the one that you'd worry about. And it depends on your top 4, man, because your top 4 are going to be your highest owned players in that kind of lineup, right? It's a 6 and a 7K guy that you're using down low. If you're going Rory, JT as your second man in, and then 2 like 10 to 15 percenters for your third and fourth man in, that probably would be too chalky. But if up top, let's say you're going with a less chalky lineup construction, maybe starting with one of those top 3 and then dipping into the 8K range, which, by the way, if you guys haven't seen the live stream I did on Ship It, the 8K range, in particular, like the middle to top end of the 8K range, you've got some sub 5 percenters there. If you're doing that up top, and then you've got those 2 as your last 2 players into a lineup, then you're probably okay in that sort of a lineup. So it depends what you're doing up top. It's ownership, as it always is a very nuanced subject. It's never who you play, guys. It is how you play them that matters, which is why, like, I've still got Burmester in lineups and he's chalky down low. I've got Keith Mitchell in lineups and he's 10% owned. That doesn't mean that I'm not using them in my 150 max pool. It's just that when I am using them, I have to be especially careful about the ownership. For example, in this Keith Mitchell lineups, I'm much more likely to have made a pivot in that 8K range than in lineups where they don't have Keith Mitchell. If I have a lineup where Keith Mitchell is not in that lineup, it might be because I have a little bit more chalk towards the top and I have to get different there and that down low. So that's what you have to think about with the ownership, the whole picture, I would say. What did I say with Sanjay Greens in regulation? We haven't gone to that yet. Do I think that Bryson or JT has a better performance? I'd go Bryson, but I really like both of them, Blake. It's kind of like choosing between my 2 favorite sons. It's kind of sacrilegious to give one or the 2, but I would side towards Bryson just because the odds reflect that. I don't think it's a hot take to say that he's the better play, so I'd go that way. Do I like Knapp this week? He hits it long and high. I do. He's in my player pool, Bobby. He's a player that is average to below average ownership in that portion of the board. The worry with him is that he's not a very good around the green player and that he's never done anything in a major championship. But what I said as a counter argument, always liking to play devil's advocate, liking to give both sides of any kind of argument, is that he's never played in major championships, right? He doesn't have very much experience. So the argument is very valid against him, saying that, okay, he hasn't proven it before. That's like, okay, has he even had a chance to do it in begin with? So yeah, I'm for him all sure. He said, probably what you need here this week. Yeah, that's my kind of stat profile. That's why I'm playing guys like Bryson this week, because if you can stop the ball on a dime Saturday, Sunday, when these greens get firm and fast, it is going to be especially helpful. So let's mention the Sanjay improp now. So this one is the same kind of idea as a Mackenzie Hughes. Mackenzie Hughes went off late. That's part of the reason why we like that under, but he's also a player that sucks at hitting greens. And if you take a look at the averages from this year, and it's not even just this year where he sucked at hitting greens, even when Sungjae Im's been a top 20 player on tour, he's never been good at greens regulation. So you can see this year he's number 117, well below average, which you kind of expect for how he started this year. It's not been his best season by any means, but even last year where he played better, he was number 145 on tour in the category. I mean, that's about as dog shit as you can get. And then year before that, he made the FedEx Cup. He was top 10 player on tour that year. He was number 119 on the PGA Tour. And the further back you go, I think he gets a little bit better in 2021, but let's take a look at that one. Number 9 on tour when he first got out here. But for whatever reason, the last 3 years on tour, and that's a large sample size. That's 3 full years, 60 events plus for Sungjae because he plays so much out here. That's why I'm taking him for a fade at 11.5. And on the books, he is even money. So unlike the Mackenzie Hughes one, where we don't have a line for comparison, we do have a line for comparison on a Sungjae, but I vehemently disagree with these projections. Just like I said with some of the other categories that I think are a little bit off, I think that they have this at least a green too high. The average last year was about 10 per round. With the players saying that the greens were bouncy, I think that it's going to be at most like a 10.5 average. So in the PM wave, that is a later tee time that Sungjae has, when winds are going to kick up and greens are going to get a little bit firmer and faster. That's why I like that under on Sungjae. So that was a no-brainer value for me. The issue is that all of the overs, all the positive stance plays that I was taking, I've already bumped over here on the prize pick side. So I could give you another fade for a 2.5x payout. Issue with that is that is just such a shitty payout to go with for a 2-leg slip. So let's find a little bit of a replacement. And we could go to the fairway board because I do think players are going to hit a lot of fairways. And the reason for this is you have a lot of rain in the area. We've mentioned that a few times. It is drying up as the week goes on, but at least for the first day, and especially the morning wave tomorrow, you're going to have fairways that aren't rolling out. So if you can hit the short stuff, you're not going to get screwed by rolling into the fringes, intermediate roughs nearly as much as usual. And last year we had that same kind of situation, and the average was 8.7 per round. So these guys like a Shane Lowry that was at 8.5. I liked the over because he's a top 30 fairway percentage player. Pretty much every player out here on tour. They had Tommy Fleetwood at 8.5. He's also a very accurate driver. So in my opinion, that one was a no-brainer, but I haven't entered this one myself. So kind of just like this Homa under, right? I took a slightly different prop for my exposure, but I would still agree with this Patrick Cantlay over on fairways because he's a average to an above average fairway accuracy guy. And if I think the average for the field is going to be about 8.7, he only has to gain 0.3 fairways to the field to go out there and cover. And what you'll see if you take a look at the sportsbook odds is we actually do have a fairway board posted for a lot of these players. Hence why Shane Lowry's at 9.5, right? Hence why I know that Tommy Fleetwood was at that kind of number. But Patrick Cantlay is minus 135 for his over. So though he did bump from 8 to 8.5, I didn't even play him at 8, by the way. I didn't have a really good pairing to go out there and play with Patrick Cantlay. But you can take this over, get some plus EV value, and because he's in the morning, it'll be a little bit softer, and you have all that rain in the area this week, you'd be taking advantage of some of those course conditions. And the issue is that we've already taken a Patrick Cantlay prop. We had that over on his birdies before, so it might be a little risky to double up on the same player just in case he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed and has a little bit of a struggle. But like a Rory McIlroy, let me see what his odds are at, whether he's at the same thing. So Rory, look at this. This is actually, I think, an even better play to take because he's a morning wave player like Cantlay, but he's at 8, so you get the push equity at that number. And I know he's not minus 135. He's only at minus 125 odds there, but I'll take that 10 points difference with the odds when you're down 0.5 lower. And we have that push equity that you can use there at 8. So the replacement is actually going to be these two that I'd point out. Players are going to be trying to hit fairways tomorrow just because of the fact that the greens still are firm. You just can't go out there and bomb and gouge this place, especially because it is so long. Rory, I'm not sure on his exact hit rate on this over at 8, but if you're telling me that he can have a below average day and still push this kind of number, and for the year, by the way, let me bring up Rory McIlroy's driving accuracy stats. It's not like he's a hyper accurate driver. I mean, he's obviously not with how far he hits the golf ball. But look at his driving accuracy this year. I think it'd be a little bit surprising to a lot of you guys that he's not losing nearly as much as you guys would expect. In fact, early in the year, he was finding a way to even gain accuracy to the field. There's weeks where he's only lost about 2% to the field. If he loses 15% like last week at the Truist, that's not going to be ideal. That would probably be like about a push, maybe a little bit below a push. But if he's losing closer to this like 9, maybe 10% accuracy to the field, I like the push equity there. And anytime you have that sportsbook value in your back pocket and course conditions that are coinciding, It's not the optimal play. It's not quite the same play as I got with these two that I actually used in my exposure, but it does give you guys a good idea of how I'm attacking this kind of a prop board. And as I said before, guys, make sure to check out the Patreon page for all of that as I'm actually entering it, because good value, I guess it's just something I had to point out here in the live stream, is never going to sit around for very often. If there's something that is actually a really good prop to go out there and take, people like myself are going to find it. And when they do, they're going to put a lot of money behind it. And these sports books aren't dumb. They have to balance the exposure to make sure that they're not getting killed by any liabilities with these projections. They're going to adjust for them a bit. So if you want to tail, a pro bettor's exposure, that like I have here, this kind of stuff, it's what the Patreon page is for. And, I gave you guys an idea of how I'm attacking each of these kind of categories. Fairway overs I like because of how soft it is. What's to note about these green regulation ones, by the way, is and the reason why it's a little bit of a different situation than the fairways, if you're just joining us, is that they have a sub-air system. The sub-air system doesn't work on the fairways, but it does work with the greens. So the greens are going to be a lot drier than what you have with the fairways, which is why I think you can play both sides of that. Bogeys, I haven't played anything myself. I kind of want to see what they have for the pin locations before I decide there. If it's easy pin locations, maybe some unders on bogeys. If it looks like a really hard round one setup, then maybe I do consider like an over on bogeys. Like I know we had a question in chat before about this Tom Kim over. That could be something that I'd go out there and want to mix in. There's a few other guys as well that aren't the best at avoiding bogeys that I was kind of eyeing up. Birdie or better matchups, I hardly ever play. So my best advice would be to stay away from this category in general, just because there's a lot of variance involved with this kind of a matchup. But if you're going to play these 0.5 matchups, which you can see they're all 0.5 matchups that they have up on the board, what this means is that if they tie, it'll end up being the less that ends up being the side that hits. If it was a 0.0, if they tied, it would be a push for a birdie or better matchup. Because of this 0.5, in most cases, the best play is the under. And it obviously depends on who they actually have matched up. But the best thing you can do for these birdie or better matchups is to find two guys that are close in terms of birdie percentage that you take for the under, where they're getting an extra 0.5 birdies added to their score. That would be my advice for that kind of category. Birdies are better. Few overs that I like. You already mentioned that Patrick Cantlay one a little bit earlier before. And then from the strokes perspective, I haven't entered a ton over here, at least on Prize Picks. I have more stroke stuff there on the underdog side of things, but maybe some fades, like especially an underdog where they have some guys that are a little bit too optimistic of projections. This is a major championship. It's going to play over par. This is a par 71, by the way. So if it plays to like a half a par over par scoring average, that means that 71.5 is going to be about that average. So if you can find some players that aren't in the best form, I found some fades that went out there and wanted to mix in, one of which we mentioned before, but it wasn't available. Let me see if he's here on Prize Picks. It was Michael Kim, and they do actually have him on here. So, okay, I want to add this one to the mix. Michael Kim for this fade is like one of my favorite props for tomorrow. And he does go off early. So he's one of the few guys that I'm breaking that role for where, I want my fades in the PM wave. The reason why Michael Kim is a fade I really wanted to see if they had on here is he's dealing with an injury. If you guys haven't seen his Twitter X already, he put out an update saying that he's dealing with a lot of injury issues right now. Specifically, his back is cramping up. He's having a lot of work done on it to prepare for this week. He said that yesterday, if he would have played a practice round, that he would have shot like 85. And he did say he was a little bit better today, probably will be even better tomorrow. But an injured golfer on a long, hard golf course does not seem like a recipe for success. So that would be another fade you can play out there as well. But for all the slips I've taken, and I believe it's 9 at this point we've already played. So a ton of exposure that I've already played out here for round number 1. You guys can find that on the Patreon page. But on top of these slips that we've already gone through together, I am going to talk about some sleeper stuff, which we can't bring up here on the browser because it is only on the mobile app as of right now. But if you guys are on Sleeper, make sure to stay tuned in here because there is a ton of value that they have over there. So where we leave off, Valimaki or Norgard? I'd go Norgard just because Valimaki is a little bit chalkier. He said, what's the bad chalk? Because we know there's good chalk and bad chalk. That's always the question, Blake. And I hate to be the guy to say, like, check out my page to see who I'm playing. But that's like the question of the slate, right? If I tell you that, it's pretty much me telling you who to play and who to not go out there and play. What I'll say, though, Blake, and this is how I decide between what's good and bad chalk. This is the process that I use. If I was on them on a Monday, I bet them outright, or I think that they were really good, like top 10, top 20 play. I think they're good chalk because I was committed to them. I thought they had a chance to win this event. They were one of the first few guys that went out there and clicked. If they have ownership, then so be it for me. So for example, my core plays, the value plays that you see in some of my content on this channel, if those guys have ownership, I don't worry about that. On the flip side, if I'm on a Wednesday and I'm going through my ownership and I see somebody is a lot more popular than the guys around him, and I wasn't on that player on a Monday, like they weren't like a no-brainer play for me, then that's bad chalk, right? And there's a clear delineation there. And it's not so much like the timing that matters, it's your conviction behind it. If you really, really liked the play, then use them as chalk, because I always say that that's okay if you offset it elsewhere. But if there's somebody that you're kind of iffy on, then throw them out of the lineups. They're not worth taking at that kind of steam. You read somewhere that Bryson in 8 rounds is by far the most putts between 10 to 15 feet. Second place wasn't close. Yeah, dude. Before he got big, so before he had like the big transformation body-wise, he was really good at Quail Hollow, which is crazy to think about because that was him when he was just an above average distance guy. And now he's a bomber, which fits this golf course even better. So bomber plus him making some putts, that would be really nice. The one thing I'll say, Bobby, though, is that he did put out like a practice round thing today, and he missed like all his putts on the back 9. So maybe he's just getting that out of the way before the event starts, though. He said it's going to be tough to get it close to the pin on these greens. I agree with that. That's why I really like the green regulation unders. I think most of your birdies are going to come on the par 5s and the drivable par 4. It's 13 or 14 that's a drivable par 4, and then the 3 par 5s. So I definitely agree with you there. He said, thoughts on McCarty? You think the guy's the real deal and he's $7,300? He's the real deal for sure. He's the kind of guy who won in one of his first starts on the PGA Tour. So I mentioned it on the Showdown live stream on Ship It, but he's the kind of guy that I'll play a lot more than most people, but I try and do it at shorter golf courses because he's not an overly long player. Like he's not a bomber. He's not a short player, but he's not an above average distance guy as well. I'm going to play him in a week or so. I'm going to play him when the golf course makes a little bit more sense. But if you want to take a shot on a guy, even with a bad course fit, then you do it on a guy like McCarty that's a winner, a guy that has shown us that he has an ability to be the best guy that week. There's a much worse players you can use. In fact, in that range, there are guys that are better course fits that I'd rather have McCarty than those players just because he's a better player long-term. Like he's going to win multiple times on tour. There are guys in this field that are never going to win on tour. What's going on? He said, so these type of putts are going to be crucial. I agree with that. By the way, Bet the Number, they do their model every single week. They were really looking at 4 to 10 feet. So you might even want to extend that out a little bit. He said, thoughts on Wyndham Clark, not in the best form, but he's got the good course history. Yeah, he's won here before. He's a good GPP play, I would say. He's the kind of like, bounce back candidate that you'd be looking for. And he hasn't played great recently, but he's had flashes of brilliance. He had the first round lead at a few signature events early this year. He's had a few rounds lately where he's put it together for 18 holes. The one thing that you know about Wyndham Clark, though, is that when he doesn't play well, especially like last week at a signature event, he is not going to care rounds 3 and 4. He has like the fastest pace of play that you're going to see. He's just going to kind of go through the motions and get the round over with. I like him here for a bounce back, but he's got to start hot. If Wyndham Clark isn't like -2, -3 tomorrow, then you might want to get a little bit worried about him because I could see him quitting a little bit. He said he won here once, if that's the course history. That is the course history that he's speaking of. You see Rahm's ownership different on sites going between 8 to 20%. Can I talk about how me and other analysts create my projections? For sure. So I've got him at closer to 13.5%. So I'm splitting the middle of those kind of projections. I can't speak for how the other sites do their projections, but I can speak on how I do my projections. A lot of mine are projections based. So I run projections for the entire industry, not just my own projections, to get an idea of, on average, where the community is on each player. And I'm not going to give away the exact algorithm, right? Like I'm not going to copy and paste it into the chat, but based on a player's price efficiency, which is essentially just that projection compared to their price tag. Obviously, the more pricey they are, the higher that projection has to be willing to pay off. The better efficiency those players have, the more ownership I give them as a baseline. On top of that, I adjust it based on what I hear around the industry. If I hear somebody being touted up quite a bit, I'll give them a little boost out there from the ownership angle. So that's how I handle it. It's mostly algorithm based, partially by hand, kind of like ironing out the differences and making it make sense. But other sites, some of them just make shit up. And I can tell you that some of them just make shit up because they go over or under the total salary that you can spend. On my site, I always spend within $200 of the max salary. By the way, how you do that, if you take a player's salary and multiply it by their projected ownership, that tells you on average how much salary that you're projecting them to use. So if you do that for the entire pool and then you add up every single number there, you're going to get the projected salary used. I know that probably sounded like a lot, but I've showed it a few times on live stream before how you can actually break this down. I looked through a few of the ownership sources this week. That is something I do. I do my research to try and go out there and give the most accurate projections possible. There were sites that were spending on average 55 grand this week. There was also a website that had on average being spent $47,000. If you're subscribing to a website that is spending $7,000 below the max, cancel your subscription. They have no idea what they're talking about. If you're subscribing to a site that is spending $55,000 when you have 50 grand on DraftKings, cancel your subscription. I think that makes perfect sense to go out there and do, right? Mine are always going to be done the right way because I actually know how to put together those kind of projections, but that's the process. You've got to weigh all of that. It's a very hard process to do. Something that if you're new to PGA DFS or really any DFS in general, you're not going to be able to do. It's a long process. It takes a lot of experience, a lot of field experience to kind of know how to adjust those kind of things, but that's how I do it. You said trust Luke's projections. Yeah, it's not even like a opinion, by the way. You can run the numbers every single week. They're the best. Like I spend the closest to 50 grand every single week. And if you run an R squared value, mine is the most accurate every single week. And there are exceptions to the rule this year. There's been a handful where I haven't been number one, but like over 80% of the time I have the most accurate projections. And that's not by chance. That's because I create my projections the right way so that the salary actually lines up and I pay attention to other people. I don't watch a whole bunch of content, but you best know that I get the synopsis from some people. I have people that watch the content for me that I talk to all the time about this kind of stuff. And it's usually me asking those kind of people, like, who's getting steamed up this week? And I get a list, 5 to 10 people out there from some of those people that I'm friends with. And it helps me out with that every single week. So yeah. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for that. Just run the numbers every week, right? Bobby knows. Bobby's been around forever. He knows. That's why he says to trust them. You can run them for yourselves. You can see I'm the most accurate. You were out there today and Michael Block laid up at 17. It's been a 230-yard par 3. He laid up on a par 3, bro. I can't wait to see that. I hope they tip it out. They might not tip it out the first few days. Or that's the issue with that kind of hole. Like 9, they're probably not going to tip out. It's 540-yard par 4. But if they do on Saturday, Sunday, it's going to be a lot of fun. Does Echeverria make sense? Him and McCarty are the two you're deciding between. I'm actually playing Echeverria this week. I don't have McCarty. I like both of them, though. So I don't want to tell you to switch to Echeverria. I would stick on McCarty if you had him in your lineup, but I like both of those, too. I just like Echeverria a little bit more there. My apologies there. What are your favorite guys? Is Sam Stevens, you're saying? I couldn't blame you for that. He's played well recently. He's in contention at the CJ Cup, Byron Nelson. He's been making a lot more cuts than what you had last year. Yeah, I'm not personally on Sam Stevens, but I kind of wish I was. He's a good long iron player. He's relatively long off the tee, and he's got good form. The one thing I'd say is that he's got more steam than he normally has because people see that recent form, some of those finishes over the last month or so. But it's not enough steam where like I'm jumping ship on that kind of guy, so you could definitely still use him. Thoughts on fading Ryan Fox, 71.5. I was considering it, Mason. It was actually part of my process today, deep diving some of the Ryan Fox stuff. He did just win the Myrtle Beach Classic, but you also have that winner's hangover that we hear about a lot of times. So I'm okay with that, Mason. It was something that I didn't end up playing in my portfolio, but it was one of the first few props that I didn't end up using. What's going on? Joe says, your boy, welcome on in. He said, amazing. Thanks for that insight. Of course, and if you have any specific questions, like just let me know because I'm willing to answer questions about the ownership. I'm just not willing to give the algorithm for obvious reasons because my stuff is better than the other people and I don't want them to be as good as mine for obvious reasons. Like, sure, I kind of hope the industry gets better over time, but if my site's going to be that much better at projecting ownership than everyone else, then yeah, and I'm going to talk about that and I'm going to let people know because they should be subscribed to my site for that, right? But yeah, I will help you out if that's something you're doing yourself, by the way. I have a book that I wrote. It's called Decide to Win. If you guys haven't already bought that, by the way, I think it's like $1 on Amazon Marketplace. So trust me, this isn't for me trying to make money here with this book. This is a legit book that I wrote. This is you can see this is not for resale. It's like the version they send you for free to go out there and proofread it. On there, I talk about modeling, creating algorithms for doing projections, that kind of stuff. And it doesn't give you like the algorithms. Like I said, I'm not going to hand you the algorithm, but I will help you build the algorithm if that's something you want to go out there and do for yourself. So it's on Amazon. It's called Decide to Win, as I said, because if you decide to win in your contest, put in the work, put in that kind of effort, you can find a lot of success. But you're not going to find that success unless you're willing to put in that kind of effort. And that's why I won't hand people the algorithm, right? I'd much rather make them learn how to do it so that they can improve it over time. Because, I could hand you a starting algorithm for doing ownership projections, but what good is that for you? You have your one system and it's never going to get better. I improve my ownership algorithm every single week. It's something that I adjust. I'm tinkering things, how much I'm incorporating, other people's sentiment around the industry, that kind of thing. It's something that you always have to stay on top of. Oh, really? What if you played both? Play both of them, Blake. I really want you to play McCarty, though, because you seem to really like him this week, and I think he's a high upside play. But yeah, dude, maybe just choose both of them between those two. How do I get the best ownership projections? How do I do it? By a lot of hard work, Joe. It's something that I spend more time on. I constantly improve it every single week. And if you want to double check them, you can find that for yourself. I've done the double check plenty of times before. Over there on X/Twitter, though, you have to do it via work. It's not going to get handed to you. That's for damn sure. Thoughts on Hatton and Brooks? I like Brooksy this week. Always play him at PGA Championships, US Open kind of setups, especially at courses where you have to bomb it off the tee. So I like the course fit. I've got to say the form on Brooks, it's a 5 out of 10. He hasn't been playing that greatly recently. He has gained strokes on approach and off the tee, though, in 4 straight events. So ball striking's been on point over the last month on Live. Hatton has been the same way. He's been like a 6 out of 10 with the form. He's been a little bit better than a Brooks Koepka. So I'm okay with both plays. I'm using Brooks. I'm not using Hatton in my player pool. Brooks, though, always somebody I'm using in majors. I kind of just find any reason to play him when I can because of his success in these kind of events. Thor Bjornsson is your 5K guy. Yeah, don't say it too loudly, X Factor. You're going to keep that ownership low, right, on your guy like Thor. But I like what you're doing there. He's long and strong, like Joe Mama says, which, by the way, Joe Mama, one of the best names in the chat. What is my favorite free ball play? So I haven't played anything yet, Bobby, but we'll talk about that here in a couple minutes after I get through some of these questions. We've talked about all the prop stuff I really wanted to go through, so we can look at some 3 balls together. That Gsluke single entry dog league lineup was the nice. My bad, I butchered that. Let me get a sip of water. My mouth's getting too dry for this, and it was, Alex, that's for sure. That was the Phillips Thor Bjornsson lineup that I had together. He said, very specific question. You're making one lineup and you're trying to decide if you should fade or play Straka. So yeah, you're already using some chalk up top. I'll give my 2 cents on Straka. I don't think it's the best week for him because it's more of an off the tee test. And he's coming in off a really big win at a signature event. Now, he's a winner on tour before. It's not like going from not winning to winning a signature event, but it is by far the biggest payday that Sepp Straka has ever seen. And it's by far the biggest event that Sepp Straka has ever won. So I think he could be dealing with not a physical hangover, but more of that mental hangover after having that kind of a week. So I don't want to tell you like to fade Sepp Straka, but there's a lot of reasons to want to fade him. The ownership's a lot higher than the guys around him. He's got that winner's fatigue out there in the back of your mind as well. So that's my take on it. You have the book, good stuff. Yeah, I know you do, Bobby. I remember you buying that. And like I said, guys, I'm not trying to make money off the book. That was never the intention. It's always been $1 or $2. Like literally, it's as cheap as I could possibly make it on Amazon to give you guys the insight. And it is an Amazon bestseller. It was at the #1 list for the fantasy sports page, fantasy golf page, fantasy. I think just sports in general was #1 for a few days over there on Amazon. So it's had some success. So make sure to check it out. He said, Luke is the hardest working guy in DFS. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I try and put in as much work as I can. That's for sure. You've been winning ever since you joined. Proof is in the research. Like, you're going to hear that on every live stream I do, by the way, too. I don't ask for these reviews. I appreciate you, though, Steven. If you want to throw comments like that in chat, I'm all for it, right? But I don't even ask for these kind of reviews, and I get them, right? I'm not the kind of site. I'm not going to name any sites, but a lot of sites out there that, like, beg their members for reviews, for them to, tout that it's the sites that went out there and gave them that kind of success. You will never see that from me ever. And I promise you that. Hold me to that to the end of time. You will never see me taking your guys' success and using it for myself. Because guess what? When you build lineups, it is you that did it. It is you that clicked all 6 of those players into it. And sure, you might get guidance from me. I give some plays. I talk about research process here. But guess what? I didn't click those 6 players for you. I didn't put in that money for you. I didn't have that risk on the line like you did. Have all of that success for yourself, right? I don't want to take that kind of like, I don't even know the word for it. Like, I don't want to like take credit for that kind of thing. Like, I feel like some sites do because I only had a small hand in that kind of a process. And yeah, if people want to give me credit for that kind of thing, I'm okay with that, right? It helps me build my business and whatnot, but I'm never going to make that like something that I force upon people that do my stuff, because I just find that crazy. Like, let it be natural. Let it be completely, what's the word for it? Grassroots, I guess. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but make it like a grassroots movement that grows my kind of channel. And when I do, I don't need to be that flashy channel site putting together videos and montages of like stuff happening. Like, that's just never going to happen over here. First off, I don't have a whole team to put together that kind of shit for me. And second off, it's you guys that deserve all the credit for that sort of stuff. So if you're a winning player now, by the way, you know, that's you. That's getting better at DFS. The projections might be helping you, Steven, but you're becoming a better player. And that's the beauty of joining a community that knows what they're doing, is that, right? It's you that's becoming better so that you can make other players better at DFS too. So let's keep that going, man. Is it how do you have all 3 of those in a lineup? Yeah, I want to know that too. It's a very expensive start with those 3, huh? You said the chalk at the bottom fails on PGA Tour. Is it more likely Hughes or Keith in terms of failing? So I kind of get what you're saying there. You're saying like down low, the chalk fades or is fadeable more than most. I agree with that 100%. And there's a reason why that would be the case. Those guys in the 5 and 6K range, they suck. They're slapdicks. They're not the best players that you have out there on tour. So if they're going to be 10 to 15% owned, they're almost automatic fades. So I'm not playing Keith. I am playing Keith Mitchell this week. I'm not playing Mackenzie Hughes in my lineups. So that's the direction that I'm leaning. But could both of them miss the cut? Yeah. In fact, based on the ownership, it might even be more likely now that both of them missed the cut just because of the kind of situation. You said, beautiful one, dude, of course. You said, you're good with numbers, but your head would fry with the ownership algorithm. Yeah, dude, it's hard. I've got to say, I have a really good background for it. I'm not expecting just anyone to be like asking about building ownerships and that kind of stuff. I went to school for computer engineering and electrical engineering. I got my degree in electrical engineering, switched from computer engineering about halfway through. Still got a minor in computer engineering. So I have a lot of experience in coding. It's not my specialty. Electrical engineering, building electrical components, designing things with magnetism, electricity. That's what I'm really good at, what I did before I moved into PGA DFS, which, by the way, it's crazy. When people hear that, they're like, what the hell? This guy with the long hair that looks like a surfer was building electrical components in cars? Yes, that's what I did before I moved into this. So very technical background. But if you are that sort of person, there are a lot of people out there. I'd love to help you in making that sort of thing. And I'm an open book when it comes to that sort of stuff too. Thoughts on a Norn pivot off of Straka? He's 9K on FanDuel, and so is Straka. You've heard Norn was hurt. He is. Last week was his first week back in about 3-4 months. And 9K for Norn is real expensive. What I will say, though, Blake, is that no one's going to use Norn. I don't have ownership projections for FanDuel. It's just not something that I put as much time into. But if I were to guess that he's going to be like by far the most overpriced guy in that range, you might want to consider making that ownership pivot if you're in a contest that calls for it. If you're in a contest with like 1,000 to a couple thousand entries, it would make sense to do that sort of thing. But if you're in like a single entry, like a smaller field thing with only a couple hundred other people, then it might be foolish to make that kind of pivot. So just make sure it's in the right contest, I would say. You said, Coach Speak Luke is inspiring. Let's go. My bad. Yeah, dude. I get passionate about things sometimes and I go into it. I've got to say, I'm really boring most of the time. It's just the engineer in me, right? I speak very bland, very to the point. It's just how I'm hardwired. But yeah, the coach speak part can be fun too. And he said, you're on FanDuel, not Draftkings. It is, right? And the pricing over there is very soft. So that's how he can fit those in, by the way, Bobby. It's FanDuel pricing is a lot softer. But let's go through the 3 balls. I didn't forget about you, Bobby. We're going to go through those before we hop on out of here. And we don't have the shots gained metrics to go through, which is normally my go-to with these 3 balls. So instead, we're just going to try and find a long shot or two that makes some sense. And it's not going to be a long shot with like one of these club pros, you couldn't pay me money to want to play them for this kind of matchup. But like a Kirk Kitayama versus Alex Noren, I don't hate myself some Kitayama here just because he's not dealing with the injury stuff and he's a good long iron player and bomber off the tee. So based on what I've seen so far at plus money, this Kirk Kitayama, it's one of the first ones we've looked at, but that might be like something we bet here over in a Hard Rock Bet, which I'm assuming Hard Rock Bet has their board posted because it is round 1, unlike rounds 2 through 4 where they're a little bit later to the punch. But we got a Jason Day, Fleetwood, Phil group. Nothing really stands out that one. I like Echeverria this week. I don't think Davis Thompson or Bud Colley are crazy players either to have to go out there and play against. So maybe the plus 250 on that could even make sense. Like plus 250 on a 3-ball is crazy odds. Like they're treating Echeverria like he has no chance to succeed. And based on the kind of stuff that I'm looking at, I think he sets up well for this golf course. Corey Connors should be the favorite, but plus 140 might not be enough, considering that he's got 2 live guys that he's playing against. You have the super group. I probably wouldn't bet any of those for a 3-ball there, especially those first 2 being so evenly matched. I like McNeely this week. I think McNeely's grading out better than a Keegan. So plus 160 on that might not even be like the worst play that I've seen. A Batia at plus 175. Like I like looking at these long shots and then trying to find like 2 or 3 that I go out there and actually play, because like the minus odds on some of these are just something that I'll never play, especially if they're like minus 155, like a Keith Mitchell. And if Keith Mitchell's dealing with the wrist injury, like you could even consider an Adam Hadman there. I wouldn't completely shit on you for that. And out of these last few groups that we have on here, yeah, like I'll never take a minus 110, especially on a guy like Bridgman. There's no way in hell. Joaquin Neiman, same thing. He won't catch me ever really betting a minus money on that sort of player. You know, if it was a mid to higher tier guy, I might have a different tune, but not when it's a mid to lower tier player like those two. So let's go through these 3 or 4 and find our favorites. So it's pretty much Kitayama versus Noren. I really like that one at plus money. Let's take the McNeely one out just because I even think Novak is live at this course with the kind of form that he's shown. Let's pick one of these 2 to play as a second 3-ball. We got the Echeverria's the long odds. I've got to say that with the analytics being so favorable on him, we're going to go with that. So it's going to be these 2 that we have at the 3-balls for round number 1. And I've got to see exactly what kind of odds that I have on Hard Rock. As you guys know, in Florida, we only have one sportsbook to play on. It's the biggest scam in human history. In fact, I only bet one outright this week, and it is Scotty Scheffler to win. So if you guys saw my breakdown on Monday, you guys know I wanted to bet Bryson. I wanted to bet JT to win. JT 16-1 on Hard Rock. That's like scam odds compared to every other book. He's like 20-1, 22-1 on some books. So there's just no way in hell I'm betting him at 16-1. And then Bryson was 6.5-1 to win on Hard Rock. Every other sports book, he's like at most 7-1, if not 7.5 to 8-1 to win. So like I'm just not going with either of those 2. Scheffler, though, he was at plus 400 on that slate. And what they had that was different compared to some of the other sports books is if your guy finishes top 5 on Hard Rock Bet, it's for the first outright bet that you place after opting in. If they top 5 and they don't win, you get your money back. And I have to see what the odds are here on Hard Rock here in a second. But let me show you the top 5 odds here. The top 5 odds in Scotty Scheffler this week are minus 110. So if you're telling me like, and that means just under like 50% of the time, he's going to finish top 5, or at least that's what the odds are implying right there. If you're telling me like half the time I'm getting my money back on this outright bet, and I can max out the bet at $250. So that's what I did. I put $250 on him at 4-1. It's a bet to win $1,250, and half the time it's risk-free. Like, why not bet Scotty Scheffler? So that's why it's the only outright bet that I went with. I would have bet 1,000 on it to win $4,000 if I could have. That's kind of the unit size that I wanted to play on a Scotty Scheffler this week. But because the promo maxes out at $250 returned, I mean, I could have bet it for $500, right? And only got the $250 back. I did cap it right at the promo mark. So that's what I did over there. Let me see what I get for the odds, though. That's why I actually brought up the app to begin with. Did want to mention the outright angle, though, for any of you that are betting over there. But where's the round 1 3-ball? So we've got to find Kitayama, who's one of the first few groups off. Unfortunately, Hard Rock Bet doesn't sort them by time, which is just another thing that I don't like about their sports book, other than the fact that their odds are terrible normally. So I can get Echeverria at the same number. So I'll probably throw a sprinkle on that one at plus 250. And I might even make it a parlay if they'll let me put them together. So we got to find the Kitayama Norn group. Oh goodness, they might not have these ones posted because you have the Club Pro in there, but at least historically, sometimes they've chosen to do that. They've chosen not to give odds on players that are club pros or amateurs, but they do have it posted this time. And Kurt Kitayama is also plus 100. And if we parlay those two together, it's plus 600 odds on Hard Rock Bet. So I'm going to play that for plus 600, those two matchups together. Am I expecting to hit this at plus 600? Most likely not. There's a reason why it's a plus 600 bet, but do I think there's some value based on the players that we actually chose? Yes. Kurt Kitayama is one of my top course fits of the week. Alex Noren dealing with an injury. I think there's a little bit of an edge to be had on that specific prop. And then the Echeverria one, I already mentioned all those advanced analytics. So let me actually go ahead. I need to add some funds. I maxed out. Oh, let's not add $5,000. We don't need to go that crazy. I almost, by the way, guys, there is a function on here to like add money and instantly bet. I almost added $5,000 and put it on that plus 600 parlay. That wouldn't have been good. Hey, we won for 30K. I would have been pretty happy, but I'm not that bullish. I'm not that bullish on those two. I'm bullish, but I'm not that bullish on them. Let's play it for $100. So it's $100 to win $700 on those two. If it hits and it gives us a little bit of an extra bankroll to work with over the weekend, then great. If it doesn't, then so be it. It's a plus 600 prop, and wasn't really expecting to hit it in the first place, so we'll leave it off there. But that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with all of your exposure out there for tomorrow, whether it's with your underdog stuff, prize pick stuff. Hopefully it treats you guys all nicely over there. In the GPPs, I hope to see you guys at the top end of the GPPs as well. It'd be nice to have a takedown or two from the community here for the second major of the year. And let's see if there's any last second questions. I got Joseph down there. Welcome on in, buddy. Big difference in points is what you meant. Yeah, let's see what question a lot of questions. My bad, guys. We're not going to cut it off, by the way, until we get through all the comments. So if you have any other comments, feel free to go ahead and hit me up right now. He said chalk is not hitting up top like a T40. So I see what you're saying. You're saying like the difference in price makes it easier for the chalk up top not to hit as much. That's kind of true, Paul, right? You don't have to do as much to hit down low, but you still have that missed cut equity, I would say. And then you said the big difference in points is what you meant. Yeah, like because up top to pay off in the 9K, 10K price tag, talking like 90 to 100 fantasy points in most cases, whereas down low, you can get by with like 80 fantasy points sometimes. I agree with that sentiment for sure. He said, what about JT Poston? Any interest for me? The off the tee play is worrisome for Poston. He's gotten a lot better over the last year or so. He's gone from a below average driver to an average to maybe slightly above average driver over the last season, which is favorable for him at this kind of golf course, but he still hasn't quite made it a strength. So I'm probably going to stay away from him myself, Blake. I don't have him in my lineups, but I will say with Poston is that his approach play has gotten a lot better as well over the last few months. So he's within reason, at least. Like in a large field GPP, I could see using him in a few builds. He said, you kind of like Fleetwood over a hurt day in lefty. What do I think? Yeah, man, I'm playing some Fleetwood this week. I took him for a top 5 at plus 700. He was one of the placement bets I went out there and threw in. And he plays well harder tracks, so I like using him at major championships, but I don't like him enough to use him as an outright bet. He's never won before, so I'm not going to bet him to win a major. Fleetwood plus 105. Is that for like a top 20 or something? You'll have to let me know. Do I like Razorman at all? He is a bomber. I worry that he hasn't gained with the irons in like 2.5 months. The iron play is a big factor at major championships just because the rough, the around the green shots are going to be penalizing. But he does have that off the tee skill set that we're hoping for. So I don't think that he's a bad play. He's probably like a 6 out of 10, I'd say, on that. He said Woodland has also looked better coming back from the brain surgery. Yep, he's actually one of my core plays for this week, somebody that I pointed out on my Monday video. And the bet that I took was a top 10 at plus 1,300. So 13 to 1 for the top 10. It's going to take a really good week for him to crack the top 10 at a major, but he's won one before, so he's shown us that ability. Where's the rye? Nothing tonight, man. I'm sorry to disappoint you out there with that, but the next few days, we'll likely have some whiskey. Got to do some interstate travel to get some access to books. This is terrible, Paul, but I considered flying to a state that has sports books to enter my PGA Championship bets. The only reason I didn't is I've got some stuff to do this week, shit to do, so couldn't do it. Yeah, Bullish Boy. Well, he said thank you, of course. My guy Joseph in chat, we love you down there, man. He said thanks, Luke, of course. Kitty and Fleetwood 3-ball parlay at plus 350. Oh, so you were talking the Fleetwood 3-ball that you were looking at? Let me look at that one, by the way, because I love them this week. So I'm always good for a Fleetwood bet, pretty much regardless of what it is. I just need to know who he's matched up against. He's matched up against Jason, Day, and Phil. Yeah, Day's hurt, and then you've got Phil the Thrill. Yeah, I'm not really worried about him, even though he's plus 320. Yeah, you could bet that and maybe make your own little parlay there at plus 350. I'm all for that. He said, one last gross question. What about Cam Davis? Wild card. He's a GPP play. He makes a lot of birdies. So if he makes the cut for you, Blake, he's going to outscore his placement, which I mean that in as positive a way as possible. Right? If he finishes in 40th, he might still be in the top 20 of DraftKings scoring because of the kind of birdies and streaks he posts. Yeah, not a crazy play. Webb Simpson wandering the greens and fairways at Quail. I don't think Webb's in the field, right? But he is from Quail Hollow. Like, he's like the Quail Hollow guy. Kind of a shame that he's not in the field, but I'm sure he'll be there. Like, he lives in the neighborhood, so you bet your ass, right? He's going to be at the PGA Championship. It'd be something to be out there on the course. Bobby, I know you're going. See if you can find Webb Simpson out there. I'd have to think at least maybe Saturday, Sunday, he'd be out there at some point. Is Day injured? He was injured, but that's why he had to withdraw from a few events. Not sure if he's still injured, though. I haven't heard anything about it. Do I think Fitzpatrick is a decent pivot? He's not my favorite pivot, but he is a pivot that you could use. He's sub 5% owned. He's played well on harder golf courses, right? Like, he's played courses like the US Open and won them before. So he's not in the best form. That's why you're getting the lower ownership. You use him and you kind of got to know what you're getting with him. You got to know that he's got miscut equity. He's not going to be the most consistent player that we have out here on tour, but he does have upside for our top 5, top 10. It's just that if you're going to use him in lineups, do it in the right format, in a format where, you know, you can take on a little bit more risk. That would be my recommendation. He said, oh man, you'll tail the top 10 Woodland play. Yeah, 13-1 seems like a good number there. Is Kim over strokes and Cantlay over birdies and Underdog a good slip? I think that makes sense. Yeah, the payout is kind of trash though, because isn't the Kim prop like 0.83x? Jack, I'm assuming you have access to Underdog if you have Prize Picks. I think there's only like a couple spots where you only have access to one or the other. If you can get on Prize Picks, take it without the multiplier if you can, because the payout, like you said, is just not great. You said, what's going on? Alex said, sorry, it's been a week. All good, man. Hopefully you're having a solid evening out there, a solid weekend. Hey, we have plenty of prop stuff here for the weekend. And by the way, Alex Escobar, if you guys don't know, is a golf tout himself. He has a Twitter/X. I think it's a Dinger Bets. I don't know if you have like any like things on the end added on to Dinger Bets, but he's going to be on the channel. The reason why I want to point this out, he's going to be on the channel doing some content with us. So we talked about doing a live stream this week, didn't end up getting around to it in time, but at some point, Alex is going to come on the channel here. We're going to talk through a prop slate together, and he's a super bright guy. I talk to him all the time when it comes to prop stuff, running ideas behind him. You know, he runs props behind me sometimes too to kind of get an idea. It'd be a good discussion. So at some point, you guys will get to hear from Alex, which will be fun. He said, you know, he didn't know anything about FanDuel. $8,600 left, and you have no idea who to play. I have no idea on the pricing, Blake, and I got to hop on out of here. So I'm going to default you on that question. Let's have ourselves a weekend. Best of luck out there with everything that you guys are going with. Patreon page, by the way, is where you can find all of my analysis for this week. Rounds 2 through 4 showdown live streams are going to be on the Ship It Nation YouTube channel. So for all of that, make sure to check out the Ship It Nation YouTube. That's where all the fantasy stuff is going to be here for going forward. And then on the prop side of things, we've got all of that here on this YouTube channel for rounds 2 through 4. So if you enjoyed this content here, you learned a little something out there for tomorrow, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Which, by the way, if you've gotten to this point and you haven't already, you're an absolute jabroni. Go ahead, fix that so that you're no longer a jabroni before you hop on out of here. And also subscribe so you guys don't miss those live streams to come. That's all I've got. Best of luck, and I'll see you guys tomorrow night.